Welcome to the Book Tribe podcast, a channel dedicated to discussing how authors can take their writing, publishing, and marketing practices to the next level. And today we're talking about editing. And to help me navigate this topic, I'm joined by Kelly, a developmental and line editor for romance and fantasy novels, working with authors to provide constructive feedback through comments and suggestions to help get their book ready to capture their readers' hearts. Well, welcome, Kelly. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. I'm super excited.
Oh, I'm super excited to talk to you about editing. And actually, I have a slight confession in that I don't actually know all that much about editing. So I'm hoping to learn a lot today. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through some quickfire questions. We're doing these with all of our guests just to get to know them a little bit before we get started. Are you ready?
Yes.
Awesome. Right, let's get into it. So, what is your least favorite romantic trope?
Quick fire question. I don't know. As long as they're done well, I don't think I have a least favorite. As long as it's done well, it's good.
Yeah, I do have one that's like an automatic for me, and it's miscommunication. Probably because I'm such a big
Yes. No. You're right. Okay. I'm 100% on board with that. There's an entire series that relies on that trope, and I was like, I can't keep.
I can't go. All right, go on. So, what is your favorite type of female protagonist?
I like female protagonists who are strong-willed, who are witty, and who are not taking anyone's shit.
Love it. Yeah, no, me too. I'm all for the badass, definitely. And if you could pick only one, would you rather read slow burn small town romances or spicy dark romance for the rest of your life? Quite two different opposite genres there.
Is a small town spicy as well? I need spice in my book.
Okay, so spice basically. Doesn't matter what.
Spice, I'm good.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, thank you, Kelly. I think we've got to know you pretty well there. So let's get into the actual topic at hand here, which is editing. I'd like to know from you, what's it like being an editor for indie authors specifically? How do you feel about it? Do you like it?
This is my favorite thing I've ever done, honestly. It's something that I never really imagined myself being able to do because I'm a bit of a slow reader, but especially doing it freelance and for indie authors, the ability to take my time with each edit to give really detailed feedback and give examples of things that maybe new authors are not 100% sure they know how to do. It it's phenomenal. And I'm the kind of person who needs to get up and move around during the day. So a 9 to 5 was never gonna work for me. So being able to do that and really immerse myself and get hyper focused on something when I'm reading and editing. And then also if something's just not clicking in my brain, I can step away and come back and be like, okay, was that just me for the moment? Or does the sentence actually make sense? 90% of the time it actually makes sense. I just need to get some water or something.
And what do you feel has been the most memorable experience for you in working with authors? Do you think there's one occasion where you felt like you were really able to help them with their process or marketing their book? What do you think? Is there something that you can pick out?
Yes. So there are these small instances, and they happen with almost all of my authors. But there's one that happened relatively recently with an author. It was her first book that she had ever written, and she had this spicy scene where she had all of the choreography. You know what I mean? The action. She had all the choreography there. It just didn't have that emotional tug that a good spicy scene has. So I gave her that feedback. I gave like an example and also some examples from other books that she could go to. And then a few weeks later, she emailed me and said, "Hey, can you just read these like 4 pages and tell me if this is what you meant?" And oh my God, the change was phenomenal.
Oh my
And
god.
that's one of those moments that it's just like, you got it. And the growth in your writing over just these few weeks is I, outrageously amazing. And the fact that I helped contribute to that is the reason that I love being an editor.
Yeah, I completely get that. There's like a fulfillment of being, feeling like you've brought value and you've contributed to that moment in their storytelling, or even, in fact, the entirety of their book. I just wanted to ask as well, because it's something that gets me all the time, is what this isn't a question I prepared for you at all. But I was just thinking about, those how would you advise authors on building intimacy between characters, particularly with like a small, like a slow burn, sorry, or a YA where it's not particularly like spicy, but there you need that tension there, because there are some books where I'm like, oh no, it's not got it, but there are some where I'm like, yes, it's got it. What would your recommendation be? It's a completely out of left field question, but yeah.
Okay. So when I was writing my first spicy scene, I was like, I have no idea how to do this. So I went back and I looked at all of my favorite books that had spicy scenes, and I specifically read those scenes. And I was like, all right, what is the commonality between these? Why are these sticking out so much to me? And what I found was that it wasn't the choreography. I mean, if something was weird, then I'd be like, I don't think you can do that. But for the most part, what really stuck out was the emotions that are in the scene. If you don't have that draw to connect with the other person, or even the emotions to say like, I'm not into this, then your reader isn't gonna feel that scene like you need them to feel it. And it's not even just the emotions within the two characters or connecting the two characters in that moment. It's also pulling in any background that they have or anything that's going on in the world that could like pull them out of the moment or push them deeper into the moment. So it's that emotional and describing the emotions that is going to connect your readers so much more deeply with your theme.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had to ask that question because I don't know why, it's something that plays on my mind. Um, but from all of that, what do you think it is to be a good editor? What qualities? I know that you've said what pieces you enjoy, but what does it take to be a good editor for indie authors?
You have to, okay, communication is key. You have to be able to communicate with your authors. And I'm not talking about just like these are my time frames and this is my pricing. I'm also talking about the comments that you make and how you write your editorial letter and all of that. So um, you have to provide kind of that constructive, I don't know if you've heard this term, but like the sandwich technique. Like you start, so you start with something really good that they've done, and then your filling is like something that needs some work, and then maybe you end with something really good. So I like to do that, especially in my editorial letters where I'm giving like the bullet point, big picture strengths and weaknesses of the book. Um, while I'm doing that, I like to end on something that is just like super silly. Like my author that I'm working with right now, she has a lot of exclamation points in her book, and I'm like, girl, seriously, the exclamation points. Like I know I use them a lot. I overuse them in my writing, but we've got to show them down here. So it's something super simple that is a super easy fix. And it's really important to have that balance so they know, like, I really like this and this is done extremely well. And there are some spaces where we can maybe add to this, strengthen this so it's a lot better.
Yeah, no, I think communication is so important, and we know that there are occasions when, authors are getting feedback from people who aren't probably editors at any stage, whether it's reviews or whether it's, betas or whatever, that actually without that that there are some toxic communications or negative communications because I don't know, they haven't been through that process of knowing how to communicate with authors in a way that is constructive, and positive, and actually is helpful. So yeah, I completely get that. And at what stage do authors need to get editors involved in sort of this creative process?
So it's when you get to the point that you can't go any further with your book. It could be after your first round of edits, self edits. It could be after your fifth round of self edits. So it's really hard to say like, okay, well at this point you need to get an editor involved. Um, but a lot of newer writers who are writing their first or second book, and maybe there are issues that they're like not sure of their issues necessarily. In those cases, I would suggest get a beta reader before an editor, a couple beta readers before an editor, because it's going to save you time and money when you do hire an editor. So they're not picking out all the things you have to go back and do massive changes on. Excuse me. Um, when you get to the editing stage. So it's really, I hate to say that it's really like up in the air, but it kind of is. I will say though that when it comes to actually hiring an editor and like the technical side of that, a lot of really good editors book months in advance. So you need to start thinking about it a while before you're like technically ready, and give yourself a realistic time frame of when you think you'll be ready to get there.
So, in terms of budgeting, if an author was saying, I need to kind of put something aside for an editor, what kind of budgets would they be looking at?
Um, it depends on the length of the book, really, and it also is going to depend on the editor. But generally speaking, 800 to 1300 US.
Hmm. Yeah, and as you say, it depends on the length, how much time it's gonna require the editors to actually go through it. So yeah, I thought that was just an important question to ask for anyone who
Yeah.
might be interested in that. Um, but what common mistakes? So when you're editing the work, you've received it, you're going through it. What kind of mistakes do you see authors make more often than not?
Um, for newer authors, I see a lot of like formal language. So it's not very conversational. The dialogue isn't very conversational. I also see um, like a lot of word echoes, which as a writer myself, I know that I am blind to them when I'm writing. So it's okay. It's honestly, it's my job to find those and to take them out. Um, and there are little plot things, that people always get into, but those are like small inconsistencies, like somebody's hair changes color, or this happens a lot. Somebody was like standing by the fireplace, and like two lines of dialogue later, they're suddenly like at the door, but they
Yeah.
didn't walk to the door.
Yeah.
So it's little things, and I can really only comment on the little things like here, because it's very dependent on each
Mm.
story and each author. So for certain authors, if I've worked for them a while, like I know what to look for. Um, but for new authors who are just coming as new clients, I'm like, let's see what happens.
See what crops up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when authors are looking for an editor to go through this process with them, what should they be looking for? Are there certain characteristics or areas where they just shouldn't look for them in the first place? What would you suggest?
Yeah, as for where to look, all of my clients have come from Facebook groups and or referrals from clients who I got from Facebook groups.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of times if you post like, oh, I need to find an editor, then they are going to be swarmed with all of these posts. So what you want to look for really are people who are recommending their editor to you, or people who have commented on their editor's comment and said like, oh, I work with this person, they're absolutely phenomenal. So that's one of the things. And then another thing you need to look for is you need to get a sample edit. Your sample edit should be free or like $20. If it's a longer developmental edit, it could be like $20 or something, but it is generally free. And then after you get the sample edit, you need to make sure that their style fits your book and what they're saying matches what you kind of expected. And also it shows that they get what you're doing and they're not trying to change everything.
Mm.
There was one other thing and now I've forgot. Oh, going back to communication.
Yep.
If the editor cannot communicate with you about things like contracts, timeframes, even timeframes of when they'll get the sample edit back to you, if they cannot communicate with you about that, run for the hills.
Just go. Look back. Just run.
That's an example like of how they're going to be throughout the whole process. And you don't want to give your book to them without any time frame and then end up like 8 weeks into the process and being badgering them, sending email after email after email. Like, what are you doing with my book? You know, you want to have clear expectations of what that communication is like.
Yeah, so communication and reliability are the two big things. Yeah, because I imagine that actually, as we've kind of touched on in the earlier questions, that a well edited book can have such an impact on how it is received and therefore the sale of the book,
Yeah.
using things. So I wondered if you kind of could explain a little bit more about how you feel editing contributes to that end product for authors.
Yeah. So if you've ever looked at reviews for a book on like Goodreads or Amazon or wherever, you're immediately going to find who has a well edited book and who doesn't. So you're going to see a lot of comments that are like, and I don't do this side, but comments that are like, the grammar, the punctuation didn't make sense. There are words that they use that don't that aren't words or aren't used the proper way. So that's something that like a copy editor and a proofreader are going to look for. And then when you've got the comments that are, or the reviews that are saying the plot was messy or I couldn't follow it, I had no idea who the character was, or they just seemed like all over the place, that's where I come in as a developmental and line editor to fix those things. So you can tell without even reading a book what's been well edited and what's not.
Yeah, no, you can. Those early reviews sometimes
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
really transparent. So if someone wants to become an editor for themselves, now you said a number of times that you also are, a writer.
Mhm.
If there's a writer out there that's thinking, actually, maybe I might consider becoming an editor, it might help with my own practice of writing. What steps should they take? Is there a certain journey that they have to go through, or is it as easy as just offering to do some samples? How does it work?
Yeah. So there are a lot of different paths to being an editor and being a good editor. I myself am, I majored in English literature, with a minor in creative writing and did a lot of editing throughout my college career, and then had a lot of people coming to me for editing after. So I had a long level of experience there, as well as I'm just a ravenous reader and I pay attention to small details, and that helps me be a good editor. Um, that, however, does not mean that anyone with a college degree is going to be a good editor. You have to be able to point out those inconsistencies, the weaknesses, be able to communicate those to your authors. Um, so if you've got maybe that background and you want to take it a step forward and you're not 100% sure, you can do a few beta reads to see how your author reacts, and if they don't have the most favorable reaction, or if you feel like you've maybe not done as well as you could, then you can go get either a certificate through a university, or you can do some courses through the Editorial Freelance Organization. They have some courses. There are a lot of different paths that you can take. I will say that practice is important as well. So doing some free beta reads, I think I did like 6 free beta reads before I ever started charging for editing. And that does make a big difference.
Yeah, because I know that there are quite a lot of authors, sorry, who write outside of sort of their normal job as well. So if they're thinking of turning authoring into a full-time business but need some extra money, perhaps then editing is another way of supplementing that. But that was just a interesting question to ask.
Actually, if I can, I want to add a little bit to that.
Go.
So there are 4 different types of editing. There's you start at the bottom level, which is like big picture editing, developmental editing, and you've got to level up from that, which is line editing, and we're working on paragraph and sentence level. From there, you have copy editing, which is grammar, punctuation, and a little bit of word choice and some other things. And then from there, you have proofreading, make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So if you're doing the more technical side, which is copy editing and proofreading, you need more training. You need to go through certification. You need to go through some courses on EFA, editorial freedom. Yeah. But when you're doing like line editing and developmental editing, there aren't that many courses. There are no certification programs that I found for those, because a lot of it is going to be intuition. Does this sentence actually make sense? Does this sentence belong here or in the previous or later paragraph? It's going to be based on how the book feels or a sentence feels as you're editing and reading through it. So I wanted to make that very clear distinction between the two, because I think that's very important for people who are wanting to become editors.
Yeah, but also for writers, does that then affect if they're looking to go through this process of editing, do they have to be really specific about what type they would like to have done at a certain point in the journey? Do they have to go through 4? Can they just go through 1? What how do they navigate?
Most editors, and I myself agree with this, is that at the very least, you need to have a line edit. If you don't have anything else, you have to have a line edit. Because some line editors, myself included, will also do some small punctuation things. Like if it's a missing period, if a quote is in the wrong place, or a quotation mark is in the wrong place, something like that, like we're going to move it because we can't help it. But so line editing, if nothing else, do that. If you're a beginner author, first time, I highly suggest doing a developmental edit first, because it's going to show you any of the things on like a plot level and character level that are going to be important to building your book up from there.
Sorry, I can hear my cat in the background. Can you hear that? It's so funny. Sorry, everyone. You're just going to tweet more. Carry on.
Okay, that's a child or an animal. I'm not
No,
sure.
guys, it's definitely an animal. I'm just saying, and he's fine. He's just attention seeking. Kelly, if you could give one piece of advice for authors about the editing process and finding an editor, any piece of this, what would you want them to take away from what we've spoken about today?
So, two things, and I've already said them, and they cannot be said enough. Get sample edits, and not just one, get 2, 3, 4 sample edits to make sure that the person you're going to hire gets what you're doing.
Mm.
And the second one is that communication. They have to have good communication through the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Very important, and I think that's come across really clearly. It's kind of in all of this discussion, it's like communication, reliability, all of those things. So if an author is listening and they have a romance or a fantasy novel that needs editing, or perhaps soon, how do they get in touch with you if they are considering using your services?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram at no, sorry. I have two accounts, one for crocheting and one for editing. So they can find me at Dogstar Creative Co. Or they can find me on my website and look at testimonials and rates and all of that stuff at www.dogstarcreativeco.com.
Awesome stuff. And what we'll do is we'll provide those links in the podcast description and on the web page that we'll be building for the podcast, so that they can just get those links easily and reach out to you. But Kelly, it has been an absolute pleasure. I think we've got some really nice points out of this conversation for authors that they can take away and input into their process as authors. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. I love talking about editing, so this is great.
I've learned a lot. Thank you.